Ahead and get started. So welcome everybody. I think Blunty. Oh no, Blunty's good. So welcome everybody. Apologies for my absence 2 weeks ago. It's been a busy time at work for me. But tonight we've got Dan, Alex, myself, Dave, and I believe Robin and Blunty are here as well. So just wanted to get started with a couple of interesting articles. And this went out a couple of weeks ago, but I don't think we've covered it on here. But let me get my screen shared here. Let's see. So the FAA has announced the stakeholder members of the UAS Detection and Mitigation Aviation Rulemaking Committee. So there are 58 aviation stakeholders that will soon develop recommendations for the expanded detection and mitigation of unmanned aircraft systems. So this is going to be a similar rulemaking committee to the Beyond Visual Line of Sight ARC. There are 58 different members. The list is right here. There's a link in the article. Let me actually post the link here. We do have little bit of recreational representation on this, which would be the AMA in the form of Chad Boudreaux. We've got ALPA on here, AOPA, ASTM, AVUSI. Let's see, any other major wing is going to be on here. So Skydio. So a couple of different places.
Some
Because the actual members here.
interesting names too, just like MLB and NFL and stuff, which are fairly obvious from having outdoor stadiums.
Yep.
But not something I'm
And
used to seeing on an FAA list of who's like this.
yeah, and there's definitely some members that have been receiving some funding from the FAA, like Drone and Defend. Drone Responders is on here as well. Honeywell. So definitely, I think the NFL obviously is a key member on here, just because of protecting stadiums and whatnot, in terms of mitigating encroachments by drones during games and whatnot. So,
We should also briefly mention that we did talk about this a little bit in the past, but in those previous meetings, we've called this the counter UAS ARC. But the FAA didn't go with that term. They've called it the UAS Detection and Mitigation Aviation Rulemaking Committee instead of counter UAS. But
right.
if you hear
It's
either of those
a little
terms,
bit
it's the same
softer.
thing.
Right. And we, since on or about last October, we've been asking the FAA, please consider us. So we're not on the list, not a member, but we have contacted a couple of the members asking to be identified as a subject matter expert, which would give us access to meetings as well as participation in some of the discussions and subgroups. It would not give us a vote on the recommendations. And we're also will be part of a technical assistance group that's being run by AUVSI as well.
So, Dave, why do you think it's important that we are somehow involved with this group?
For two reasons. I think being aware that technology is important from the perspective of what type of technology is going to be able to disable or take our aircraft out of the sky, just so from an awareness. And secondarily, I'd like an appropriate representation of people flying FPV, so that there's not a characterization of careless, clueless, and criminal as all of the small UAS operators.
And how many representatives are there for recreational operators here? There's AMA. Is that the only one?
Well, I would assert that the AMA is primarily interested in fixed wing line of sight aircraft from flying fields, and I certainly understand that the multi-GP is a special interest group of the AMA, and I know that the AMA headquarters folks are interested in growing the AMA organization with drone participation. But if you most fields that certainly I work with, are more interested in fixed wing line of sight model aircraft. So I would assert that there's very little recreational drone FPV type of skills out of these 58 companies
Yeah, I would
or
say maybe a loft
organizations.
would be kind of a side recreational support. John Grains has always been pretty
Ab-
supportive of
Absolutely,
recreational for sure. So
absolutely good
maybe
point.
1.5, 1 3/4.
Yep, absolutely,
So
I agree with that.
Yeah, and a
out of
lot of these
50.
companies and names are people we're familiar with from the Beyond Visual Line of Sight ARC, from the AAAC, and other things like
Right.
that, right?
Right. So we've
Yeah.
been able to reach out and ask for please identify us as a subject matter expert. But absolutely, we know a number of these folks, and so it's not a matter of, oh, it must be a rotation. So this is the same crew that's been on many tasking groups, as Dan points out, as well as Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee.
And here's the key thing that I'm seeing a lot on here is a lot of this is associations. So it's member like associations that are supporting multiple people within their segments, right? So you've got the Airborne Public Safety Association, Airline Owners and Pilots Association, American Association of Airport Executives, stuff like that. And this is something that I think and something I'm just going to toss out there is that associations can be um, strong kind of organizations when they're representing multiple aspects of their, kind of segment of the industry. And this is something that I think
Yeah.
the
And they're usually well funded in the 501c6, and they usually
yeah,
have lobbyist
and
arms
it's
as
something that
well.
we're lacking in the hobbyist community, right?
Completely. Yeah, we have
So
nothing. No, we don't have any trade association operational.
yeah, so maybe something to consider. But yeah, so this will be moving forward, and I thought I saw something that there might be another one coming up, another rulemaking committee or something. Did you send an email about it, Dave? I'm
That was
sorry.
this
Uh,
one.
Was it this one? Okay.
Yeah, when I first saw it, I thought, oh, maybe this is different, but it's just because
Yeah.
they
Okay.
gave it a different title than we were expecting. We had been previously talking about it under.
Yeah. Fair enough. All
yeah, we
right.
have
So next up is the city of El Paso. They are the first U.S. city to implement a fully networked remote ID system to detect drones and protect airspace. So the city of El Paso, Texas, is the first city in the United States to fully implement networked remote identification to detect drones flying within and beyond 500 square miles of the airspace from the El Paso International Airport. So this is interesting.
What does that mean that they implemented it? Like, so everybody flying there has remote ID that's connected to the network? All the recreational
Well, here's
pilots?
the
I
here's the
think they're
thing is it
collecting it as the
doesn't
city,
really.
right?
What's that?
I think they're collecting it as the city, right? Like that's the idea is they're putting up receivers to collect this information around the city
Yes.
so they know where people are.
Yes. So, and what it's saying is they're using the term networked remote ID. So, and it doesn't really go into specifics here and might require a little bit of research, but are they collecting broadcast remote ID signals? Which I would assume the answer is yes. But they
Yeah, but
definitely have to be putting a lot of receivers.
my understanding, and I might be wrong, of this was basically they're just doing essentially a mesh network across the city that they're
Mhm.
using to pick up remote ID broadcasts from people across the city so they can build an active map of drones in the city.
Yeah. So if you're flying in and around El Paso, you know, uh, be prepared to be tracked, essentially, is what's happening
Fly
here.
Sub
So
250.
the groundbreaking achievement will serve as a model for other cities across the nation and will provide enhanced public safety, support for commercial drone operators, and privacy protection for drone pilots. Interesting.
Is there any implication in? I apologize, I can't make out the text. Is there any
Oh, here,
implication
let
in
me
that
pull it.
article on detect and avoid?
No. So,
Oh,
it is implementation of the system comes months ahead of the mandate requiring broadcast remote ID by September 16th, 2023. Um, They say El Paso's accomplishment in implementing the first fully networked remote ID system, going beyond the FAA's broadcast ID requirements, is a testament to our city's dedication to embracing technology and innovation. This milestone positions El Paso as a leader in the drone industry, paving the way for safer, more efficient, and prosperous future for our community. The fully networked remote ID system is a cutting-edge drone identification and tracking technology designed to provide real-time information about drones operating within a specified airspace. So 500 square miles, that's huge. So I'd be interested to see what they're actually doing for privacy protection for drone operators, because everything we know about remote ID offers zero privacy protection.
Right.
Are
A
So
particular location of the operator. Yeah.
yeah,
Malo.
do
so
they have I think this is part of what people are worried about. Do they have a responsibility to worry about privacy when they're only broadcasting a number and not the name of the person and the location? You know what I mean? Like, I think there's like this barrier that happens where because you're a number and not a name, it becomes a different implication. And I think that's a concern people have. I mean, this is going to
yeah,
happen everywhere. It just happens to
Yep.
be the city that's doing this, you know?
Mhm.
And the other thing, Dave, you asked about detect and avoid. They do say, like, they talk about a square mile radius from the airport, and they talk about civil infrastructure or restricted zones. So I do think this is going to be like data used for detect and avoid, and like sort of moved into that zone, or that's what I would guess anyway. That's probably why they're paying for. That's how they're paying for this, right?
Or
Like I
they'll
would
use
assume
this
is like
as
that's part of
evidence
this.
as to why they need a counter UAS system in particular
Right.
places. Oh, we detected 3,000 drones flying over this prison or this water treatment plant, so we have to do something about that.
Yeah, it's going. I asked the detect and avoid question because the FAA explicitly has said again and again and again that remote ID is not to be used for detect and avoid. So
Right.
we're not even a month, or several months before implementation, and we're having the discussion. So this should be interesting.
I mean, these cities can't even figure out they're not allowed to make their own rules, much less you know what I mean? Like, I think
Yeah,
they
right.
probably think they're doing amazing work because they're going above and beyond here. You know?
That's right.
Yeah, so hey, Joe, so jumping in, Dave. So yeah, absolutely. The regulatory environment doesn't give municipalities the authority to do any kind of counter drone as far as taking or stopping drones out of the sky by default. But I can say at least locally, for instance, last week we had a helicopter pilot that reported a drone that flew over them, and the helicopter was at 900 feet. So that's a problem. So I know at least locally, the data that we're using with the RID and the RF packet detection, it's even though it doesn't identify the operator, since it does track and identify the locations, it just gives people a tool, on the enforcement side to go and try to make contact. And it's not to be mean. It's if somebody's flying a drone at 900 feet around a helicopter, that's a problem. It's a big safety issue that gives the drone community a bad name. So I don't know specific to El Paso, how they're planning on integrating it, but I know at least locally with us, we're using that data and that technology to try to keep our airspace safe, and then to follow up when we do have encroachments and complaints and things like that.
Good background. Thank you, Rob.
Can
Gonna
I
be
ask
interesting
Rob
too, because go ahead.
Yes.
real quick? Just Rob, in those cases, are you guys like? Is it just covering critical infrastructure, or is there like a you know what I mean, or is it like a bigger program there, like where you're covering way more?
So it depends. So for us, we're just kind of covering critical areas. But I know like airports, like DFW International, the technology that they use, they can cover about a 30-mile radius. So, and that's way well outside of their airport area. So that's another tool that that airports use, but also local jurisdictional municipalities can tap into if need be. But it's one of those things. It's not being actively. I can tell you, it's not being. We're not actively monitoring that stuff. Looking for, who's flying. 250 feet in a 200 square. It's not that. It's when something. There's thousands of drone missions every single week in those areas. The only time it really comes into play is when something comes up or something happens or there's some kind of a report of something where we know something's wrong.
Interesting.
No
Well,
thoughts.
we'll
Thank
see
you.
what happens. It'll definitely be, interesting to see what kind of information comes out of this if we get any kind of information. But 500 square miles is quite the big cluster around that city. So yeah, we'll see what
I think we're
happens.
going to also see. I think we're going to see this technology, expanding to other places because historically, to detect, aircraft, you were going to need, like the aero armor, the aeroscope, the hidden level, the places that could detect the actual frequencies and the packets. Where now with the RID requirement with the Bluetooth or the Wi-Fi, it's essentially any cell phone can detect it and pick it up. So I think that this technology is going to be more and more widespread because really, if you think about it, El Paso just has to put some kind of a sensor equivalent to a cell phone, at strategic places around those 500 square miles to get the detection. So,
Yep.
Alex is teasing Apple, of course. His app, and the joke that Alex is making is that Apple detects Bluetooth 4, and of course, Remote ID has to broadcast Bluetooth 4 and Bluetooth 5, and Bluetooth 5 is the beacon, and that's the one that can go a good distance. So if you have an Android phone, you're in luck. You can detect Remote ID if you want. If you have an Apple, there are apps available that provide detection, but you're only going to pick up Bluetooth 4.
And not every Remote ID system will be broadcasting Bluetooth 4,
Correct.
as far as I understand.
Because they can do Wi-Fi beacon, right? If they do Bluetooth 5, they have to do Legacy 4. But if they don't do Bluetooth 5, then they can do Wi-Fi beacon and not do Bluetooth 4, I think is how it works.
Yeah, you got to do 5 because 5 incorporates the error code, which is required in the spec.
Okay, I felt like with 5 said you had to also have 4 in it, like as a legacy mode.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, true.
Okay.
So it says, we got a couple, so actually it says, because all bad actors will have remote ID. I mean, and that's the case to be made, right? So, no, not all bad actors will have remote ID. They'll either subvert it, they won't have it, they'll build drones without it, all those different things. But, the course of the matter is that, you know, generally a manufactured drone, an easy access drone, will have remote ID going forward. So,
or in the case of there was somebody just this week near Minneapolis that was arrested for flying a drone. I don't know if that's already on your list of things to talk about, but
no, it was kind of a smaller thing. But go ahead, Dan.
They flew somewhat close, I believe, to a helicopter, and they were followed and tracked and arrested. I don't know all the details. It sounds like, Kevin Morris had some quotes in the article, but it sounds like they're at least insinuating that the helicopters fly at 1,000 feet in the air. So if the helicopter was close to the drone was 1,000 feet in the air, and therefore was breaking the rules. But obviously, they're not releasing any details yet. I think the Care 11 article was the one I saw with Kevin Morris's quotes in there, saying something like, "It's only a matter of time before someone dies or something because of this."
Let's see. Here we go.
Oh,
this is just on. Oh, here we go. Care TV.
Helicopter Association International would have a more sensible approach, which is a lot of their helicopter pilots, a member of the association, fly under 400 feet, as opposed to, well, if you're near a helicopter, you must be above 1,000. That's what they would say.
Yes, it says most helicopters are flying around 1,000 to 1,500 feet. So the assumption is the drone must have been that high too.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
So it says the pilots were able to avoid a collision with the drone. State Patrol says investigators were called to the scene, and together with Minneapolis police officials were able to find the drone's pilot and make an arrest. The FAA has taken over the case, and there's a chance the pilot could be charged. He says the drone and helicopter in this case shouldn't have been in the same airspace. Says federal laws states drones can't fly any higher than 400 feet unless the pilot receives specific approval from the FAA. So
good. That's accurate. That's good.
Let's see. There have been So there have been incidents where we've had collisions between drones and aircraft. Fortunately for the traditional aircraft involved, it did not cause any further damage than perhaps an emergency landing. It's important to remember that although the drone may look like a toy, it's really an aircraft, and you are the drone's pilot. You're flying that aircraft in airspace that is shared with other aircraft in your area. Nothing about Oh, here we go. He's concerned that future crashes and loss of life that could happen. So.
Yeah, I guess I exaggerated that a little bit. There is a concern that could happen. It hasn't yet.
So interesting. All right. So another kind of roundup in the drone delivery market. Walmart-backed DroneUp is cutting jobs as drone delivery market struggles. So let's see. It started laying off DroneUp, a Walmart-backed startup competing alongside Amazon and others in the drone delivery market, is cutting jobs across the company. The Virginia-based company began informing staffers of the layoffs Monday morning, according to two people who lost their jobs and asked not to be named because they weren't authorized to speak publicly. The layoffs come as the tech industry continues to downsize and were a part of the company's decision to focus more on its delivery hubs, a network of facilities for on-demand orders in the U.S. DroneUp is moving away from enterprise services like construction and real estate monitoring, aerial data capturing, and marketing, the ex-employee said. DroneUp confirmed the job cuts and the strategy change and said in an email that layoffs hit a small percentage of the team, which now includes 418 people. So company said that over the next 6 months, we will hire more people than were laid off. Well, I'm sure that's comforting to the 418 people.
I think that it's a 418 is the total employment, and it's a small percentage of the 418 that's being laid off.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, fair enough.
But it's I mean, I feel I'm with you. My heart goes out to anyone who's laid off. It's an awful situation.
Yeah, I mean, went into Bed Bath and Beyond today, and it's just like, God, it must suck knowing your job is like there's an expiration date on it.
Yep.
You know.
I would assume this is like seasonal based on contracts or something. Like, they don't have enough contracts to like maintain the people, but they expect to get more or renew and then they can rehire people, you know what I mean? Because like otherwise, what is the business plan here for getting rid of people and then immediately hiring people back in 6 months? Like that's not like a reasonable way to run a business.
No,
So
not
like
at all.
and also, like, I don't know, it seems crazy because at the same time, all we're seeing is info out of Zipline of how they're doubling down and they're going to this whole new system and they're adding all these new machines and they're dumping money in. And we just did a story on the news about a pizza delivery place that is now going to deliver with Zipline in a 10-mile radius from their pizza joint in multiple locations in Seattle. And Zipline is promising to do these deliveries. It's like, I just don't understand the
Ziplines
market
delivering
right
pizzas?
now.
Aren't they the ones that throw boxes that roll on the ground?
No, this is with their new ones, right?
Okay.
So yeah, their old ones are like toss it on the
The one that
ground.
drops down, right?
Well,
Yeah, this is their little robot. They drop a robot and the robot flies down and then comes back up and then docks back in their big drone.
DroneUp doesn't have a VV loss waiver. Zipline does. DroneUp's still limited to visual line of sight.
Interesting.
So
Oh, it'll
that.
definitely be interesting because they're both partnered with Walmart, and so yeah, it's just and Flytrex has signed multi-year partnerships with Walmart. So 36 Walmarts in the U.S. have the service for drone delivery. So it'll just be interesting to see where this goes. I mean, we've seen companies come and go already in this, so it's not surprising to see layoffs, but it'll be interesting to see if they kind of turn it around, or like Blunty said, it's just a seasonal contract based kind of thing. So
They could
Or
also
they know
just
this
kind of
is
model or mimic Amazon's model.
you mean where they start fires when they crash?
Yeah. Or well, just laying off and hiring people, laying off
Yeah.
and hiring people. The
Yeah, for
similar
sure.
model.
I just
It might be.
it just really hurts my brain to think because it costs so much money to hire somebody and train them and
Yes.
onboard them and it just seems like something you say to appease investors, but you don't actually expect to hire people again in 6 months. But I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I mean thousands of dollars to just hire somebody and get them started. I mean, is expensive. So
and then the time for your staff, it's just
yeah, I'm with you, Blunty. I'm with you. All right. So last but not least, we've got the BS remote ID device coming from Drone Tag. So Check UAV tech startup Drone Tag is helping pilots in the U.S. stay regulation compliant, save money in doing so, and also show their true feelings about new rules coming into force in September with the company's new and evocatively named Drone Tag BS
And yes,
remote ID.
the BS stands for what you think it stands for.
Sure does. So,
Right.
Broadcast system.
There you go. This is a clever company. So they're out of Prague, Czech Republic, and Lucas Burchell, who has been on a number of our Discord servers and chatted with us. We've spoken to him a couple of times. Very bright, I would say young man, but I hope he doesn't take offense to that. Running a good size electronics company. They have a number of successful remote ID products, and cleverly and tongue firmly in cheek with the naming of BS module.
So the
Very
BS will become
aggressive,
available
initial
on
pricing.
the BS will become available on Monday, May 22nd for the 1-day pre-order price of $49.
Right.
Before rising to what will be its habitual $89 per unit. So the company says the ultra compact device will permit drone operators to easily upgrade their craft and become instantly compliant with the FAA remote identification rules. They're saying,
Right.
of course, most newer drones that have been or will be delivered with remote tech, that have been or will be delivered with remote ID tech, except if you're a hobbyist, they won't. But users of most older UAVs will need to install solutions by third-party solutions like
Right.
producers like Drone Tag. So um, the one thing that I feel like a lot of the industry misses, and a lot of the news industry misses, is that the fact that hobbyists exist and have existed for a long time. Um, and a lot of them assume that everybody's just buying off the shelf products, which isn't always the case. So there's going to be a lot of potential market for things like this. So definitely be interesting from that standpoint. So
Yeah, and
um,
we will work to get a hold of one of these
mhm.
and evaluate it to the best we can without any sophisticated lab equipment. But try it out, try it in the field, weigh it. Should be able to measure amp draw. And chatted with Lucas about this, and he's very aware of our relationship with Flight Test and that broadcast module. So we'll be transparent as always what we're doing, but figure we'll get a hold of one of these BS modules as quickly as we can and share what we can learn.
Yeah, one thing they mentioned is that the software needs to be updated to get the UART out for the GPS. I think that'll be a big deal for people because that was a
Agreed.
big concern when I brought it up. Was like, hey,
But
if I can just pull this as a UART to my flight controller, then as a GPS, then that's pretty easy and it's not a big deal because it's $50. The problem is Lucas talks about that's basically his break-even cost. He used terms in our Discord like he was actually losing money. I suspect that's probably not the case, but he said $89 is going to be the final cost for the production volumes he's going to see, unless he sells like a crap ton of them all of a sudden. So 89 is definitely going to be steep to a lot of people who are still expecting the FAA's estimates to be correct. And I don't think we're going to see anything like that includes a GPS. You're going to
No.
have to you're going to have to pay some money. Like, unfortunately, that's just the world we're living in right now. They also have the Drone Tag DRI, which is $50 that we talked about before. That's pass through for GPS. I think that also needs an update to work with Betaflight. And that, is $50, but you need a GPS. And then the other option, there's that new one. I don't know if you added it to the roundup, but there's that new one that just got announced from Cube Pilot. That's $40, and that one also needs a GPS as well.
So you have to
Seems
source that
surprising
yourself and add.
to me that these can pass the FAA's anti-tamper, tamper resistance features.
As we all know, that's not an actual requirement because everybody just checks off. These companies are allowed to check the box off and send it in.
Yeah.
So unless really somebody would have to do an independent review where they're going in and attempting to tamper with these and then show how they're tamperable, and then the FAA would take that. You know what I mean? Like that's the only world I can see where something like this would happen because the FAA is not going to vet any tech.
It's just pretty obvious that
Here's-
you could tamper with this just by not connecting an antenna or disconnecting an antenna, or in the case of the one that passes through a GPS, you don't connect a GPS and then there's no GPS
Well, remember
signal.
though, My understanding is the GPS isn't technically the target of the tamper, right? It's actually the remote ID broadcast is what you can't tamper with. That was my understanding of the rule.
So the funny thing is that there's a specific requirement for GPS, a certain standard that they have to apply to for the remote ID. Correct, Dave?
That's correct. It has to have horizontal and vertical accuracy.
So, and it a specific protocol too, right? It has to be compatible with a specific protocol, right? GNSS or something like
GNSS.
that. So there are many different GPS units that don't conform to that standard. So hopefully these providers are providing that information to the end users that to be compliant, you're going to need to provide a specific protocol
So
and accuracy of a GPS unit.
I would argue there's a question there though, because we know that you can not have a lock and still take off, because of the restrictions that were in the ASTM, the notes that were in the ASTM. Because if you're in a
Right.
canyon or indoors, it can just ignore the GPS. So in that case, because of the way it's written, does it really matter the accuracy? Because then you could just say, you know what I mean? Like, it sucks because this is going to be really tough for anybody to. It's never going to be nailed down, right?
This is this is a thread that keeps that you have to really pull and keep unwinding before you to follow this through. And so I think we made the implication that the FAA is giving a very brief, scant review of all broadcast module documentation on the declaration of compliance, and we found that to be true. And so then it's up to the manufacturer to test, and this is both bench testing and field testing, and determine the interpretation of the means of compliance to things that were intentionally vague, like tamper resistant. So there's some that do and some that don't, and this is going to be a challenge. And so one of the things we're talking to the FAA about is that their review of these broadcast modules is not helping anyone. We're putting companies that are doing this right, and Drone Tag is definitely one of them. Put a fair amount of money into development, test, and then how do you compare with someone who's done zero testing and cut the whole cost? But hey, there's a declaration of compliance approval.
I'm going to do the devil's advocate real quick and just say, would we really want to have a board at the FAA who thinks they understand technically but doesn't actually attempting to review all these modules and take 4 months per module? I totally understand. Like, it just sucks because if you think of the alternative, the government's not going to do that efficiently in any way. They're not going to actually understand what's happening, and they would vet them poorly or not at all. You know what I mean? So
you just look at the process they have for free as in remote ID modules.
Oh, you took the words out of my mouth, Alex. I said we could give it to the same team that's working on FRIAs. Took the words out of my mouth. Boy, that's pretty cutting of us, huh, Alex?
Oh, we got some questions here, so let's see if I can. So Daje, he says, can anyone see the information being broadcasted, or only authorized people?
Anyone
with a cell phone, generally Android, that can detect Bluetooth signals.
But you won't get like the person's name. That is something that the FAA and police officers would have access to. You would see like the serial number of a remote ID module. But it's only a matter of time before people start matching up a serial number with a person, or at least a pattern of where a certain drone flies.
Right. As well as location. I mean, the location will be broadcast.
It's a unique identifier. It's just as good as the name.
Basically,
Yep.
And it's all law enforcement's going to have to go through the FAA to get any of that information, and we don't know if it's going to be a subpoena process, if it's just going to be a request. But at the same time, I wonder how it's going to look. If it's like any other government maintained database, I don't see why any of us in this meeting tonight couldn't go do an open record request on what drone registration corresponds to this remote ID session. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting how it lays out.
Yeah, that was a point of contention and discussion with the FAA, because there were a number of private pilots, and they said, look, it's an open database in the FAA. If I have a tail number, I can find out who's the the pilot registered to that aircraft. And is this going to be like that? And the FAA swore that that was not the case, that they would protect it. But we'll see.
Do we know? So Dajay also asked, do we know yet what the consequences will be if you're caught flying without remote ID?
Good question.
Well, probably education first. That's usually what the FAA goes with. But if you do something stupid, then you'll get fined.
So this comes from, let's see, I don't know that I trust that. Let's see.
Yeah. And Alex, I should mention that Alex is a FAST team member, so he says that with significant background and context. That's not just puffery.
So it says, according to an article on DroneRush.com, as an aircraft operating within the national airspace of the United States, you could be held accountable for any aviation laws regarding the licensing and operation of an aircraft. This can include fines up to $200,000 and civil lawsuits if you put any humans in harm's way.
Right,
Which,
and
I don't know how accurate that source is, but
Meat made the point that this is all civil, and absolutely right. These are rules and regs, and that means that and so to Alex's point, if you do something that's really dull and you break a law, then you're up against criminal. It's like last summer we had that here in upstate New York, where the guy decided to mouth off to a forest ranger, which is never a good idea, and he got tagged with reckless endangerment, which is a thing in New York, and they can take you for a ride on that one. So it's not a good idea to argue.
Yeah, the only FAA like serious enforcement actions that I've seen have been pretty egregious stuff. Going all the way back to Trappy. I think that's the first major one that I recall. And then there was a guy that was charged with criminal charges. I think it was in California. I think it was Los Angeles, if I recall. He actually crashed into a police helicopter, and then of course you have the Bengals encroachment, the guys that were flying down in the NFL stadium. But all of those things, if you go back and you look at what they were doing, it wasn't just they were flying out with remote ID. It was pretty egregious stuff that actually put humans in dangerous situations.
And part of that is the FAA can only publish incidents or enforcements if they're large, like after a certain size. So a majority of enforcement that the FAA does is unknown to the public because of PII and other information. So the ones that you do see are big and stupid stuff that people do.
So definitely some good questions. Thank you for that. Let's see. Next
Remote ID, always a hot topic.
Yes, it is.
I have one that I would like to address real quick, which is, are there any
go for it.
consequences to putting out a fake remote ID transmission? Is that an FCC violation?
It could be both. So it could be. I mean, this is just me guessing. I'm not a legal person by any stretch of the imagination, but I would say it could be an FCC violation and it could be an FAA violation.
Yeah, I don't think it would be because it's
Double
it's a
dipping.
basically it's an open spectrum. Anybody can broadcast on it and do what they want. Like,
But if you're busted putting out like a spoof, yeah.
and you can
Yeah, I
you can
almost wonder
spoof
if you-
SSIDs for wireless. You can spoof all kinds of things, and there's no penalty for doing so if you're using a public channel.
As long as you're using a device that's Part 15 approved and it's legit. So that's
I'm wondering
a really
if you
good
get
question.
busted. I wonder if you get busted for something else though, like putting like you get busted for not for let's say flying over people, and then they can throw that on as an additional charge that you were putting out fake information.
Yeah,
I suspect they would find a statute to get you under.
Right, and
if you broadcast 500 fake remote ID signals in an area,
Right.
Yeah, I'm with Blunty on that. I think it'd be like hunting a deer with a GPS collar. They would make it a goal.
Hey, Rob, just a heads up. We're getting some feedback from you when everybody else is talking. So.
Gotcha. Sorry about that. Let me mute it.
No problem. Yep.
All right. So, Dave, what do you got?
So Dan and I have had the august pleasure of updating our FPVFC safety guidelines. And so as of today, I think there's a new set of FPVFC safety guidelines up on our website. Looks like we lost Josh.
No, he's still here. Just his
Okay,
video's
great.
off.
Okay, wonderful. And the as we've been talking about this for a couple months, and it's done. So it's updated, it's approved, and the FAA is happy with our updates. The majority of the changes were two areas. One was FPV racing, and the second was night operations. We declined to add anything in about a requirement for strobes or lights to be added to the aircraft, and instead we said that you should be able to fly with ambient lighting, and if you can't, then that's an issue. You shouldn't fly.
Although I would
they
say
also-
that the paragraph we added about night flying is very open to interpretation.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we had.
We'd also encourage anyone, and this is a group of folks that are more interested in regulations than most, so we absolutely would encourage you to take a look at our nice brief spelt 16 pages, I think it is now.
It went from like 10 to 15 pages roughly, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Way too much.
So there was a lot of explanation that we were asked to provide, and that's the part of this that really got our dander up, is that okay, I could see that there our FPV racing, we intentionally made it very light. We also intentionally made the night ops non-existent in our safety guidelines, and it was all approved. So the FAA then came back and
Or
said,
we thought it was
would like you.
approved.
Yeah. Yeah, well, apparently it was, because we only now have the official letter from the FAA recognizing us, so it was approved. So they then came back and said, well, we'd like you to update these two areas, FPV racing and night ops. Okay. Then once we did that, they said, well, there's more in the document that we would really like you to update. Now we get into rulemaking via an advisory circular, and we're going to raise some cane over this.
Yeah, they really got
So-
into the details, even definitions of words and all kinds of little things that, yeah.
More
very
definition than they
frustrating.
put in any of their rules.
Yes, yes, yeah. So as a lot of folks know, we were proud of the work we did with drone safety team, where we led an ad hoc committee on the UAS ASRS, Unmanned Aircraft System, Aviation Safety Reporting System, monitored or managed by NASA. So this is something that, with the recommendations we made as a committee, if it's streamlined, this could make sense as a good way to report incidents. So we wrote that up in our safety guidelines. The people reviewing our document had never heard of ASRS. That's curious. And had never heard of course, UAS ASRS. So we had to change the reporting system, so the whole write-up in our documentation. We also made a big point of statute versus requirements, and this is law versus rules. So we had to lean into that a bit. We also were required to talk about what sort of flight preparation do we want to do on the aircraft, and we were asked to define appropriate and nominal dimensions of a FPV freestyle field. Okay.
Anywhere from
we were
about this big to this big, right?
So we were able to agree on that last one, that no, that's the antithesis of freestyle. There's no definition
There's
of
no
a
limit.
flying field. It'd be awesome if you guys knew, what we were
Anything.
talking about.
Yeah, it became very clear the person reviewing our regulations was thinking, you guys fly at AMA flying fields, you do boring circles, and that's what the regulation should be about.
No, sorry, sir, we do not.
Yeah. So we've got an approved set of safety guidelines, and that's up there, and that's one piece. Any questions on the safety guidelines? Josh, did you want me to also talk about the couple other areas we're into, or hold
Absolutely.
that till later?
No.
So I see one question: how are we doing on FRIAs? And of course, so we submitted on May 2nd with a due date of May 3rd. Comments due to a set of guidelines that are probably going to go into place about the programmatic environmental assessment for FRIAs. And so if you're at an AMA flying field, and the AMA came out yesterday and said that they have been working with the FAA since 2021 on this document, and news to us. The AMA has been completely silent with anyone else on this, and the AMA, if you're flying at an AMA flying field, you might get a buy on the programmatic environmental assessment. But if you're looking for a new field to be approved as a FRIA, you might be asked for an environmental impact statement. So the again, as usual with the FAA document, there's a lot of interpretation, and so our comments that we posted up on that document were our response was scathing. Things like citing the AMA as representing 95% of all small UAS operations, et cetera, et cetera. So in terms of the FRIA, we are asking for a program manager to be assigned to us as a CBO that will help us navigate the FAA, and hopefully that'll happen over the next couple weeks. And that's top of the list. Is we really need to work on this on the FRIA situation. Next up on our docket is the noise policy we've been talking about. That has a July 31 deadline for comments. And Josh mentioned the detection and mitigation ARC, which has a kickoff on 23 May next week. And that's what we're working on.
Can we mention, I mean, I'll just say, I think we can, that they already have been denying FRIAs. I don't know
really?
like, if anybody knows that, right?
We know
I think
of that
we talked about
one that was having an issue.
I know of one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we know they are working on FRIAs in so much as denying them.
And so much for a serial process. Remember, they told us we're going to work on these as we receive them, and we know among the 5 or 6 of us that we dropped in requests that were like early in the count, and none of us have heard a word. So interesting. Maybe these the folks that were denied, maybe they applied for FRIA requests.
We
in
started
October.
We started a couple months late because we didn't get our CBO approval right away.
Yep.
I believe it's educators who are getting denied currently because that's where they're still at. Because educators, like colleges, could apply immediately.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, educators, not primary or secondary schools.
Okay, so
they have to be chartered.
Who pays for the environmental assessments? Quick Flash in the chat is saying that he said some people in the FAA said it would be the FAA covering it.
No way. No.
FAA covers nothing ever.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to be clear.
That's explicit in the PEA FRIA document. That cost is borne by the organization managing the applicant. Yeah. Right. Not the FRIA, not the CBO organization, but the organization using the field.
So let's make this clear. The FAA pays for nothing. When they came out with Trust, they specifically said that they did not want to host it, that they wanted other organizations to host it because they wanted no financial responsibility for it, but it's a requirement that they have. So there's absolutely nothing coming from the FAA for any kind of, you just give money. They never give.
It does seem at least like the UAS part of the FAA has no funds for anything anyway.
Yep.
Well, they give funds all the time for tests, for like test corridors and counter drone stuff and testing that we never see the results
grants
of
and things like that.
Yeah, so I mean they do give that, but yeah, no, don't expect them to pay for your EPA inspection.
Like they don't even have much money for those droning on events or anything, right, Alex?
No.
Yeah, no. They have a couple of
And-
stickers.
Right. And there's a good question here. Environmental impact of a field question. You know, so the if you take a look at the PEA free of comments, they're posted up on our website. You'll see that we flagged a couple of the areas in the document that are of concern, and one of them is endangered species. So it's pretty easy to kick off a requirement for an endangered species environmental impact study. It doesn't have to be climate. It can be wildlife, and that can get very, very expensive. So good question, and yeah, of a flying field. And so it does look like the one area that could be a saving grace is if it's an existing field, it might get a buy. And so, I was flying here, last year. It's an existing flying field. So that's how, to my mind, that's how free applications should be drafted.
Dave, James Spears asked, has there been any discussion on drone flight or maintenance logs? The FAA gives people more leeway if they see attention to detail. So didn't they ask us about like trying to tell people, like, was that just reporting, or were there something where they were trying to get us to make people report like other things?
They were creeping up on logs and reporting and flight logs in the
Right.
advisory circular,
I don't have time for that.
we said, ain't nobody got time for that. No, we said no, and we did not include any of that in the safety guidelines.
Okay.
Good question.
I like Legendary Sideburns comments that I have no idea how y'all put up with this much bureaucracy. And yes, it is not easy. And sometimes in our meetings, the frustration comes through.
Yeah, bubble over.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, this will be interesting. So, I mean, did we get?
Sorry.
And sorry, I've been out of the loop for a second. Did we get API access to
Oh
Freedom yet?
no.
No,
They
they said that's
denied
not
that
a thing
secure
still.
enough.
It's a
They don't think it's a
security-
thing. Right?
It's a security issue,
Okay.
and it's not possible. And so
Okay.
we're gonna keep on that one.
Oh, wasn't
They
it?
don't seem to
first
understand
it
how
doesn't-
APIs work.
First, it doesn't
no,
exist. Then we
doesn't
showed them
exist.
that it does exist. Then they said you
Right.
can't
Here
use
it
it because
is.
that's a safety violation or issue. And then we pointed out that their website uses it for users to submit their data. We just don't have the documentation on it. And they're like, well, sorry.
Okay.
Oops.
So a bunch of people who don't know what's going on. Cool.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you, Guilty. What'd you have?
Quick Flash asks, what's the estimated cost of environmental impact study, or or in another
We
way,
don't-
do we know
we
what
don't know
environmental
yet.
impact studies
Yeah.
might cost in other cases like
see.
this?
Yeah, I'm from hanging around and watching in the various places I've lived across the country. It goes from thousands to millions of dollars.
Let's see. So a 2-month window should provide a sufficient time to complete a thorough environmental assessment. This is just random stuff. Cost anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000, while a phase 2 assessment can range from $7,000 to $60,000. So hey, there you go.
I don't have that kind of money.
You got to really want that free, I think.
Yeah.
More like
And-
PETA.
And to me the downside is if you say, all right, okay, we'll do an EIS and an environmental impact study, and then the FAA says, well, we're going to deny you the application of the FRIA. Now you've got a federal agency working with you on environmental impact. You think they're going to all just walk away and close up shop and let you continue to fly? Yeah, not hardly.
Well,
So
don't forget
we
that
want
if
to
you,
walk through this.
as soon as you put a remote ID module on your drone and fly it in that location, the environmental impacts must go away.
What Dan is referencing is some of the FAA documents that said, your alternative is just to use a remote ID broadcast module, which, in point of fact, he's absolutely right. So if we have a flying field, and it looks like wow, they could stick us to say, we need to do an environmental impact study. It might be the right thing to do is just to put broadcast modules on your aircraft.
I guess
Not
a bunch of drones with $100 broadcast module is a lot cheaper than a $3,000 to $6,000 environmental impact survey, unless there's a lot of drones
That's
there.
spotted out much
Right.
safer in that
right,
ball
and then
channel.
it's
I mean,
yeah, and then it's
Well, because they can
yeah,
get
it's
out
mitigate.
their phone and see who's flying where.
Right. Yeah, and remember, this stuff gets into you do the study, then you have to do the mitigation if the mitigation is ever possible.
mhm.
So yeah, this can get ugly. So we're the idea behind the programmatic environmental assessment is that the FAA was supposed to have done a lot of study, and then if you're at an AMA field, most of the time you can, as I said, you can get a buy on this. You don't have to do any further work. However, if you read the document very carefully, you'll see that there's lots of leeway that allows pretty much a number of different agencies across the federal government to come in and do an environmental impact. So this to me is just a messaging on, okay, remember that number that the FAA said the maximum number of FRIAs we're going to do is 4,000. Well, they could turn out to be right, because by gosh, it's going to be 2,600 AMA fields and a couple others. And that's not what we want, and we're going to work to see if we can fix that. But it's we're working uphill right now. Okay,
Yep.
and with that cheery note, so Mrs. Lincoln, other than that, how did you enjoy the show?
All right. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's sometimes a stream of bad news that we have from these town halls, but sometimes it's just about keeping you guys informed of where we're at, where the FAA is at, where other organizations are at that we know of. So, don't shoot the messenger. We're trying for sure. Anybody
Alex,
have?
Alex
Well, we
Alex
want
has
to end with some good
Yeah.
news.
Yes,
Yeah. There
thank
you
you,
go.
Alex.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this will probably be released officially tomorrow from the FAA, or at least by the end of the week. But at Exponential last week, the FAA allowed me to dive their booth at
Oh, nice.
like, so they had like a tower in the middle of their booth, so they let me fly my tiny whoop around it, surprisingly. And they're going to make a video that they're going to post on their website. But here's the flight. I'm not sure. Can you guys see the black screen right now?
Let's see.
We see your Discord.
Can you see the Discord? Ah, great. I have to actually share. What? Wrong thing. It doesn't want to show the video player because I don't have this on YouTube. Oh, here we go. Now it will. So now you should be able to see the
It's a
black
player.
screen there.
Yep, I
And,
dive bombed the FAA.
So this is their booth, kind of, and they let me fly my tiny whoop around it, surprisingly. It took a couple of days to actually for them to give me permission to fly there, but, well, it was
You didn't just gorilla whip
They
it?
did. No, I didn't, because I figured I would just ask, and they ended up wanting to do a video about it. And you can see there's a dozen FAA folks all around the tower, just flying through it. And then
Nice.
at the a couple of friends there who were also enjoying watching.
Oh, nice.
Oh, there you go.
Ooh,
Super
nice,
cool.
Alex.
But also
Nice.
very,
And then-
very sad that you couldn't have done this outside.
Yeah, and I kind of told them that this couldn't have been done outside. And yeah, that's pretty much that
Cool.
flight.
Well done.
Yeah.
I hope
And,
some FAA employees left learning a thing or two about drones.
I'm pretty sure they did.
Not
we
that-
got some more of them on the simulator.
Not that it's
Yeah,
going to change
and-
any
right.
regulations, but hopefully we're slowly changing a few employees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you not only getting out to Exponential, but you also staffed an effort for Drone Safety Day, right, Alex? And
Yes. So
in
drone safety.
Jersey.
Yeah, in Jersey. So Drone Safety Day, they were at Warren Community College in New Jersey. I got together a couple of local pilots and we set up a booth. And EMAC sent us a easy pilot so we could get some kids flying behind some goggles. We had a nice track set up so kids could fly. We had it set up so that when you walked in, the sims were right there, so you could go straight to the sims first, and then once you could fly on the sim, we took you to some tiny whoops, and you could fly the tiny whoops, and then we also had a couple information sheets of how you could get into FPV or different resources to start, um, and all kinds of stuff like that. And we had a decent turnout, constant flow of attendees. We had kids, adults, parents, grandparents, all going through, and we even got a bunch of flying with the FAA there too. I think we got about 80% of the FAA folks who are at the Droning On event to actually fly.
Good for
And
you.
that was a
That's a
pretty good.
noble effort. Great effort with the community, with the public, as well as as we were saying earlier, put some goggles on FAA personnel. That's a great thing. So thank you for setting that up. Really appreciate it. And I know Rob was working on an event same day, Drone Safety Day, down in Texas. So Rob, thank you for that work as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dave.
Okay, Josh, anything else?
Nope. Just we're a little over a month out, but we will be at Flight Fest. So Dave, myself, Rob, and Alex, I think, for a day.
Yep.
So the rest of us will be there for the entire event. So if you're going to Flight Fest, come and see us. I believe we are going to be holed up at the Pilot Institute tent, as well as have some space in one of the build tents like we did last year. So feel free to swing by, say hi, and bring us whatever you got, and we'd love to see it, and love to do some flying with y'all. So
Yeah, come fly.
The week after Flight Fest is IO, so if you're interested in IO as well, I'll be at the entire IO event.
Way to go,
And,
Alex.
so yeah, race. We'll have tracks for beginners all the way up through world-class pilots, but tracks are available for everyone to fly.
Yep.
And there's also a freestyle track. And if you only want to do freestyle, there's a freestyle only pass too. So it's discounted for if you just want to fly freestyle at IO this year too.
Yep.
All right. I think with that, we'll give you back the rest of your evening. Thank you guys for joining us. We definitely appreciate the input, the questions, the comments. We love all of that. We love hearing from you guys. Like I said, sometimes it's a little doom and gloom, but just keep in mind we're here to inform, let you know what we're doing, and let you know what's going on in the regulatory space and a little bit beyond. So thanks for sticking with us, and we'll see you in another 2 weeks, guys. Thanks.
See ya.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.